I've gone through some challenges that only angels could help get me out of. Pastor, one night, me and some of my friends, we're together, and this is a little hard for some of you, so get ready, because here it comes. I'm with some friends, and we're shooting up heroin, and they didn't tell me that the heroin was laced with embalming fluid and rat poisoning. So when I shot up, my heart went into cardiac arrest. And so the friends of mine, it was a cold night in February, dragged me to the emergency room and dropped me in front of the door, but didn't take me in. So I laid out there in a seizure that I was having, induced by this heroin. And they said I was out there for about 2 hours before an ambulance showed up. And they brought me inside, and they said it was the cold that preserved me. When I got in there, I don't know whether it was a vision or whether it was a dream, I saw my spirit get out of my body. And I saw the doctors working on my body while I'm over here looking at them working on it. And I'm standing, it's an amazing thing. And they're working on it, and all of a sudden I heard voices. And I turned around, and two men, dressed in black suits, impeccably dressed, walked over to me and started having a conversation with me while I was in the emergency room while they was working on me. And they're talking to me, and they're trying to tell me it's time for me to leave the room. But I had some sort of an affection to the body that was in it. I wanted to see what they was doing. So I wasn't paying them much attention. And then I heard the flat line. And they took the sheet and threw it over the top of my head. And I saw them when they tied the toe tag on my toe and pushed me over on the side. At this point, the two men that was in the room started really talking to me to get me out of the room. Some time may have gone by because we was having a chat about something, and my mother walks in the room to come to identify me. And as my mother's walking inside the room, my mother's not saved. So my mother comes in, and while I'm laying on this gully, she pulls the sheet back, and instead of praying like the old sanctified mothers pray, she starts beating me on my chest, and she starts cussing me out and telling me how stupid I am. The smell of nicotine is on her breath, and the smell of alcohol is on her breath, and she's pounding and she's cussing me out. But somewhere between the cussing and the fussing, she stopped and she looked up and she says, Lord, a mother is not supposed to see her child die like this. She said, God, if you raise my son up from here, I will give you my life. The minute she said that, the two gentlemen that was on both sides of me grabbed my foot and my arm and tried to pull me out of the room. And while they're pulling me out of the room, the ceiling opened up and an angel came down in front of me and said, get back into the body. I coughed one time, and here I am tonight. Here I am tonight. I'm not done. So I tried to kill myself, fooling with this heroin. I went through stages of problems, oppression, and depression. When my daughter got pregnant, I told the story on TBN. My mother called me and she said, son, I got to tell you something that you don't know about yourself. And I said, what's that? She came to visit me and she says, I was pregnant. I had 6 children. I was pregnant again, and I told myself I'm going to bring another child in this world for your father. He was no good. And I found myself pregnant. So I went down to Van Brunt Street, and I went and I had an abortion. And in those days, they were doing, abortions was against the law. So they were doing abortions with hangers. She said she went to this shop, and this man worked on her, and she thought it was done. She bled for 2 weeks, couldn't take the pain anymore, went to Long Island College Hospital. They worked on her for a few hours, and they came in and they said to her, listen here, we got 2 problems. You have an infection in your womb, and you're also pregnant. She said, I'm not pregnant. They showed her the x-rays, and they said when the object punctured the birth bag, blood formed around it and formed a clot and held the baby in place, and you're still pregnant. And she looked across the table and she says, you're my 7th child. The devil tried to kill me in the womb. My mother helped me to understand why I was subliminally suggesting this to my daughter, because what he could not do to me, he was going after my seed's seed. This curse to the third or fourth generation. Wow! My mother told me the story. 2 years ago, my mother passed away. This January will be 2 years my mother passed away. I was doing a show on television, and I was talking about chronic rejection and how that I dealt with rejection. I hate to hear a person say, no, you cannot, no, no, no. So I worked very, very hard where I don't have to ask you for nothing. So I have to hear you say no. And I worked it out good. But that's not good to live like that. And I'm on television and I'm sharing with the story. My mother calls me. She says, son, I need to talk to you about something. I said, what's that? She said, I got to tell you something that you don't know about yourself. I said, good, Ma, but I got to get Jennifer. My daughter was on the line, so I got to get off the line. She said, no, let her stay on the line. She needs to hear this. She said, remember I told you when after Jessica went through her situation, and I told you how I tried to abort you and you wouldn't abort. Oh, I love that way she said it. You wouldn't abort. Yeah. She says, what I didn't tell you is that when I brought you home from the hospital, I didn't pick you up for 90 days plus days. I wanted you to die. So I put you in the basket net and I put toilet paper in my ears so that when you cry, I could not hear you. She said, when my breasts would fill up with milk, I would drain the milk and pour it down the drain or flush it down the toilet bowl. I wanted you to die. She said in those days, they didn't know much about postpartum depression. That's what she said. So there you was. She says, I was bothered, hurt, and embarrassed. I said, Ma, what was you embarrassed about? She said, your sister was pregnant at the same time I was pregnant. I'm grown and your 14-year-old sister was pregnant at the same time I was pregnant. And in those days in America, if your child had a baby out of wedlock, they would send them down south and send them away. And then when they come back, they say, tell everybody that the child is your cousin. Hey, cuz. And you tell them, this is your cousin. There's some cousins in here, ain't it? Said, she was pregnant and I had no money to send her away. And I was embarrassed and people were talking and she's pregnant. She said, but George Gary, my name is George Gary. She said, George Gary, the strangest thing happened. She said, your sister was cramping. She said she was having some problems. She told her to go to lay down. That night we went into a room and there was blood in the bed. We carried her to the hospital and she had miscarried the baby. But her breast would still fill up with milk. And every time you would cry, your sister would go over to the basket net and pick you up and nurse you. Now I knew me and my sister was close, but not that close. Intercessors. Individuals that God has set up at strategic times and places in your life to help carry you through your very difficult storms.